So, I, 29M, grew up in a family that never really had much. When I say never had much, I mean it in every sense of the word. Money, stability, opportunity, even peace of mind. My parents did their best. I won't take that away from them, but best doesn't always mean enough. My dad worked in construction most of his life until his back finally gave out. He was stubborn, too proud to ever admit he was in pain, but I could see it. The way he winced when he bent down. The way he'd shift in his chair at dinner like he could never get comfortable. And my mom. God, my mom worked herself to the bone. Cleaning jobs, babysitting, sewing for neighbors, whatever she could find. Some weeks, she'd do 3 different jobs just to make sure we had enough to cover rent and keep the lights on. We weren't starving, but we were surviving, always just barely. Clothes came from thrift shops, birthdays meant homemade cakes with dollar store candles, and vacations were just afternoons in the park pretending we didn't notice the families going home to nicer neighborhoods. By the time I hit my teens, I'd already cycled through more jobs than most adults I knew. Delivery boy for a dingy pizzeria. Cashier at a gas station where the owner always skimmed hours from the paycheck. Stocking shelves overnight at a convenience store. Tutoring kids in math when I barely had the energy to finish my own homework. If it paid even a little, I took it. The truth is, I wasn't working for myself, I was working for us. Every dollar I earned went into the same jar my parents dipped into when bills came due. I didn't resent it, at least not at first. It was just how we lived. But over time, that grind did something to me. It made me hungry, not just for food, but for more. More money, more comfort, more stability. I wanted a life where I didn't have to count every single coin before deciding if I could buy a bus ticket. And then one day, something strange happened. A friend of mine, let's call him Jared, pulled me aside after class. He wasn't rich either, but he was the kind of guy who always seemed to stumble into good opportunities. He leaned in, almost like he was telling me a secret. "Hey man, you're good at math, right?" he asked. I shrugged. "I mean, I get by." "No, seriously," he pressed. "You've helped me out before. You're patient. My cousin's friend's family, super loaded, like mansion-level loaded, they're looking for a tutor for their daughter. She's in high school, struggling with calculus. The pay's insane." That word, insane, hit me like a jolt. "How insane?" I asked. He grinned. "Like, more in a week than you probably make in a month." I laughed, thinking he was exaggerating. People like me didn't get jobs like that. But he swore he was serious, said he'd put in a good word for me. 2 days later, I found myself standing in front of a house that didn't look real. You know those glossy magazines with photos of sprawling estates? The kind with fountains in the driveway and perfectly trimmed hedges that look like they've never seen a leaf out of place? That was this place. I stood there with my thrift store backpack slung over my shoulder, staring at a front door bigger than the entire bedroom I grew up in. When I rang the bell, the door opened almost immediately. The mom, let's call her Mrs. L, stood there with this big, warm smile. She looked like the kind of woman you see on TV shows about perfect families. Blonde hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. Designer clothes that looked casual but definitely weren't cheap. She greeted me like I was an old friend. "Oh, you must be the tutor. Come in, come in. We're so happy you're here." Her energy was almost too much, like she was overcompensating. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but looking back, she had this naive, overly trusting vibe, like the kind of person who saw the good in everyone, even when she shouldn't. The dad, Mr. L, was the opposite. He barely looked up from his laptop when I walked in. He gave me a curt nod, then disappeared into what I assumed was his home office. He had this air of distance about him, like I was just another employee walking through their revolving door of staff. And then there were the kids. 2 of them, teenagers, maybe 15 and 17. I expected spoiled brats, but they weren't that bad. Spoiled, yes, but in that polite, well, the first session went better than I expected. The daughter, the one I was hired to help, wasn't stupid. She just lacked focus. Once I broke things down in a way that clicked for her, she lit up like she'd just solved a riddle that had been haunting her. By the end of the hour, she actually thanked me, and her mom was practically glowing with relief. When I left that day, Mrs. L pressed an envelope into my hand. "Just a little something for your time," she said. I didn't even look until I got outside. Inside was cash, more than I'd ever made in 2 weeks of delivery runs. My heart was pounding. That was the moment everything changed. One session turned into two. Two turned into three. Soon, I was at their house 4 nights a week, sitting in that gleaming kitchen with its marble countertops, teaching calculus while inhaling the smell of catered dinners I could never afford. And the money, it was like a faucet had turned on. I was pulling in more than I ever thought possible, more than my parents ever made combined some months. For the first time in my life, I had extra. I could buy decent shoes, eat food that wasn't instant noodles, even tuck away a little for myself. But here's where it gets complicated. I didn't just tutor. Slowly, my family started getting involved. At first, I thought it would just be me. Just me tutoring, earning enough to make a difference. But the thing about money is, it changes the way you see the world. Suddenly, things that felt impossible start to look possible. That hunger I'd carried my whole life, the one that whispered you'll never have enough. Well, it didn't go away when I got the tutoring gig. It grew. It was my sister who made the first move. She's always been sharp, way sharper than me in some ways. Quick thinker, natural talker, the kind of person who could sell sand in a desert. One day, she tagged along to pick me up from the L family's mansion because my parents needed the car. While she was waiting in the foyer, she noticed their youngest kid, 6 years old, a restless ball of energy, scribbling on the walls with crayons. Mrs. L apologized profusely, flustered, saying how she tried everything to keep him calm and engaged. My sister didn't even miss a beat. She crouched down, pulled a sketch pad from her bag, she always carried one, and started directing the boy like some kind of professional. "See how your lines are heavy here? That means you've got big feelings," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "When we do lighter strokes, it helps those feelings settle down." The kid was hooked instantly, and so was Mrs. L. By the end of that 10-minute encounter, my sister had a new title, art therapist. Of course, she wasn't certified. She'd barely finished a semester of community college before we ran out of tuition money. But she was convincing, and Mrs. L never questioned it. A week later, she was coming over twice a week with finger paints and charcoal, getting paid more than I ever did slinging pizzas. That was the first domino. Next came my mom. Mrs. L had mentioned in passing that their housekeeper was getting older, slower, not quite keeping up with the demands of such a big property. My mom's ears practically perked up when I told her. She's always been meticulous about cleaning. Our apartment may have been tiny, but she made sure it was spotless. One afternoon, she staged it perfectly. My sister accidentally let slip that she knew someone with decades of experience managing households. My mom showed up, dressed like she was interviewing for a CEO position. Calm, professional, with that same quiet endurance I'd seen all my life. It worked. Within a month, the old housekeeper was retired, and my mom was wearing an apron embroidered with the L family crest. Felt surreal. And then came the final piece. My dad. Mr. L had this sleek black car, one of those luxury sedans that practically purrs when you turn the key. He hated driving, though, always muttered about traffic, always looked annoyed behind the wheel. My sister noticed. She also noticed how casually Mrs. L mentioned that their chauffeur had become unreliable. Guess who stepped in? Yep, my dad, with his old-school manners and calm, steady hands, slid right into that role. We'd thought we were clever, that we'd gamed the system, but compared to him, we were amateurs. The air in that basement was thick, heavy. My sister clutched my arm so tightly her nails dug in. My dad kept glancing toward the stairs, like he was calculating the odds of just walking away. My mom, God bless her, looked like she was about to cry. Mrs. K's husband stared at us with this mix of fear and desperation. "Please," he rasped, "don't tell them. They can't know." The 4 of us just stood there, frozen. It was like looking into a mirror, an uglier, darker reflection of what we were doing. We thought we were infiltrators. But here was proof that the house itself was layered with secrets, with parasites clinging to its wealth like barnacles on a ship. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. We weren't in control. Not really. We were just one move away from everything collapsing. First, it was just awkward. A secret shared between too many people. Mrs. K begged us to understand. Her husband clung to her like she was the only thing tethering him to reality. And for a few minutes, there was silence, thick, suffocating silence, down in that basement. But awkwardness doesn't stay awkward forever. It festers, turns sharp. Mrs. K's voice cracked as she laid it out. If you don't let him stay, I'll tell them. I'll tell the family everything. About him. About you. Her words sliced through the air. My mom's face went pale. Please, don't, she stammered, her hands trembling. My dad's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, his voice rising. This isn't fair. You put us in danger. You're the one who lied first. My sister exploded. She shouted that we'd worked too hard to risk everything now. That Mrs. K had no right to threaten us after sneaking her husband under everyone's nose. Her voice bounced off the basement walls, shrill, panicked, almost feral. And then, like a cruel twist of fate, we heard it. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway. The wealthy family was home, hours earlier than expected. Panic seized us like a tidal wave. We scrambled. My mom tried to shush everyone, whispering frantically, "Upstairs! Now! They can't see us like this!" My dad tried to block Mrs. K and her husband from following, while my sister hissed that we had to lock the door, hide the evidence, something. But chaos doesn't care about plans. Mrs. K screamed. My dad shouted back. My sister shoved her, and in the scuffle, someone slipped. The sickening sound of a body hitting the stairs echoed in the air. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. It didn't matter who had fallen. What mattered was the noise. Too loud. Too obvious. From upstairs, I heard Mrs. L's cheerful voice calling out, "We're home! Did everything go okay?" We scrambled like rats in the walls. My mom bolted up the stairs, trying to meet them at the door with her best smile plastered on, as if nothing had happened. My dad dragged Mrs. K's husband deeper into the shadows. His hand clamped over the man's mouth to stifle the groans. My sister clutched the railing, wild-eyed, her chest heaving like she couldn't breathe. And me? I stood frozen halfway between the basement and the kitchen, caught in a nightmare where every second stretched like an eternity. "Dinner smells wonderful," Mrs. L's voice floated down, oblivious. The kids giggled as they carried their bags in, asking about snacks, about homework, about nothing at all, while just a few feet below, lives were colliding, secrets bleeding out into the open. That night changed everything. We didn't get caught, not fully, not yet. Somehow, by some miracle, my mom managed to steer them upstairs, distract them, keep them from asking too many questions about the muffled noise beneath their feet. But the damage was done, because from that night forward, there was no denying it. The balance was shattered. The thin veneer of control we'd been clinging to was gone. Every glance between us carried suspicion. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like exposure. Every word Mrs. K hissed in warning echoed like a gun pressed to our heads. The wealthy family still had no idea, not the full picture. They laughed, they ate, they carried on with their lives as if nothing was wrong. But we knew, all of us who had stood in that basement, who had seen the truth, who had nearly spilled it all in one chaotic night, we knew this couldn't last forever. The house had become a ticking time bomb, and I couldn't shake the feeling that, when it finally went off, none of us would walk away unscathed. It didn't happen because we slipped up, not because we left some clue lying around, not even because Mrs. K couldn't keep her threats quiet. It happened because the man in the basement snapped. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. The L family had thrown a party, guests in glittering clothes, music drifting through the hallways, waiters carrying trays of champagne. We were all on duty, scattered across the house like pieces on a chessboard. My mom in the kitchen, my dad outside, shuttling cars back and forth. My sister entertaining the kids with crafts to keep them out of the way. And me circling, always circling, making sure I didn't miss a step. But down below, in that hidden basement, the husband had been stewing. Months of secrecy, hunger, humiliation. It all boiled over. And then it happened. The music swelled, laughter echoed, and suddenly, the basement door slammed open. He stumbled out, wild-eyed, his voice raw as he shouted, "Do you know what's happening in your own house? Do you know who you've let in?" Everything froze. The guests turned, confused. The wealthy parents, Mr. and Mrs. L, went pale. And me? My heart stopped. He pointed at us. At me, at my mom, my dad, my sister, his words tumbling out in a frenzy. He raved about the years he'd been hidden below their feet, about the scraps he'd survived on, about how we'd known, how we'd kept his secret only to guard our own. And then the worst part, he told them the truth, that we weren't strangers, that we weren't just employees, that we were a family. The room turned on me in an instant. The whispers spread like wildfire, disbelief curdling into outrage. Mrs. L's face twisted, her naive warmth replaced by something sharp and betrayed. Mr. L's voice was ice as he demanded, "Is this true?" And I couldn't deny it. Not anymore. The carefully built world we'd constructed, our roles, our stability, our fragile disguise, it all crumbled in that single moment. The jobs vanished, the trust shattered, the home we'd infiltrated turned cold and foreign. We were cast out, one by one, like intruders finally unmasked. And now here I am, sitting in the same cramped apartment where it all began, staring at the peeling paint on the walls and wondering if it was worth it. Because here's the thing, we weren't stealing. We weren't breaking in or robbing them blind. We worked, we cleaned, we drove, we taught. We gave them everything they asked for, and we did it well. The only lie was that we were family, and maybe the fact that we stayed silent about the shadows living in their basement. They got quality service. We got survival. For a brief, shining moment, it felt like we'd beaten the system, like we'd carved out a place for ourselves in a world that never wanted us. And then it was gone. So Reddit, AITA for living a double life inside someone else's house. Even if it all blew up in the end,